All right, welcome to the Thursday edition of the Morning Pitt here on youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. I'm Chris Peak from Panther-Lair.com. You know that website, Panther-Lair.com, Pittsburgh.rivals.com, the most comprehensive source of Pitt sports news on the internet. It's what we always say. We say it so often that people now repeat it. So I guess the tagline is catching on, which means it's time for us to change. I'm going to have to come up with a new tagline for the website, but whatever that is and whatever that becomes, you know what we have right here. It's youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. It's our YouTube channel. Do me a favor and subscribe. Hit that subscribe button right down there. I think I'm pointing at it. I can't entirely see it on my screen, but I think I'm pointing at it down there. There's a little blue button. It says subscribe on it. Click that thing, and then you can also turn on notifications, so you get an alert sent to your phone anytime we go live, or when we release a new video. So we go live, of course, Wednesday nights, 8:30 for the Panther-Lair show. We go live after the football games every Saturday. I'm not entirely sure what time those post-game shows will start. I don't know what time we're going to start on Saturday. You want to make sure you don't miss it. Subscribe to our YouTube channel, turn on notifications, and you will not miss any of our live streams. Then, of course, like this video while you're here. While you're here, we appreciate that as well. Obviously there's basketball going on kind of all around us based on when we tape this thing. We might not entirely be able to talk about all the hoops that's happening, but I wanted to look ahead to Saturday anyway. Not necessarily for the matchup of Pitt-Duke. We'll talk about that more tomorrow in our game preview episode of the Morning Pitt. But more so, I want to look ahead to the fact that it's senior day. And we talked last week about super seniors and guys who could come back as a super senior, guys who have that option to return. There's 27 scholarship seniors on this team, and by my count, about 20 of them have the option to come back for an extra year of eligibility. After the NCAA ruled that everybody who was on a roster during, in the 2020 season, the COVID year, could have an extra year of eligibility. And it all seemed like a great idea at the time. I'm still kind of on board with it, although you're getting further into the classes, guys who were younger at that point. It's definitely created some headaches in terms of the accounting and the numbers and whatnot for coaching staffs as they try and figure out what scholarships they're going to have available, how many they're going to have available as they recruit high school kids and transfers. That's for Pat Narduzzi and his group to figure out. They'll have to kind of identify how many guys are going to come back and how many scholarships they're going to end up having available. For now, what's more interesting to me, at least today, is just this senior class as a whole. I mean, we talked last week about guys who could come back and who might come back and who will take up a scholarship spot and who won't and all this kind of thing. And so we won't go as far down that road, other than just to say that I think this decision-making process is going to be interesting for a lot of guys. I think it'll be, there are a number of decisions for some of these players to make. And obviously, you come to this point in your career, you basically have three options. You can come back if you're one of these 20 guys who has eligibility remaining, and some of them don't, I'm trying to think who, some of the offensive linemen, Owen Drexel, Gabe Hoy, Marcus Minor, Carter Warren, those guys are here as super seniors right now. Tyler Wiltz is here as a super senior right now. Deslin Alexandra is here as a super senior right now. He can't come back. Those guys cannot return. They've used up all of their eligibility, even that extra year, the COVID year. But of those other 20 guys, they can choose to return, or they basically have three other options. One is to try their fate in the NFL. One is to transfer. I was blanking on my second one there. To transfer, to go to another school to play that final year of eligibility, kind of like Tyler Wiltz did here. Although that's a big step, going from wherever he was, Southeast Missouri State to Pitt. There's not really sort of an equal and opposite step of Pitt to somewhere else as far as stepping up. It'd probably be more like AJ Davis or Todd Sibley transferring down a little for an opportunity to play, but that's neither here nor there. But transferring is an option, and then sort of retiring, hanging up, and ending your football career. And those are the really the options that these guys are facing. They can either come back and use that extra year, provided the Pitt staff welcomes them and they want to play another year, or they could do one of those three things: try the NFL, transfer, or hang it up. And I think for the guys who want to try the NFL, I mean, they're obviously going to have to get as much information as they can. And I think Pat Narduzzi has done a good job of that in the past, of getting information for his players as they look to make this decision. And they won't just be getting information for some of these guys. I mean, I think guys like Kalijah Cansey and Izzy Abanikanda are going to be getting information about where they stand as draft prospects and what makes sense for them. I mean, I wouldn't expect either one of those guys to be back at Pitt next year. That's just my guess. I'm not reporting anything. Don't put this. It doesn't need to be on any website saying, report Abanikanda and Candy to go to the NFL. I mean, I think that's just sort of a semi-educated, mostly just kind of guess on what I think we would all probably expect. But as far as the seniors go, these 20 guys who could potentially come back, I mean, they're going to have to decide, where they stand as draft prospects. They're going to have to get feedback from the NFL if they're first round, second. We always talk about, this guy had a fourth round grade, or the feedback he got was third to fifth rounds. I mean, ultimately, when you submit papers to the NFL, the official feedback you get is first round prospect, second round prospect, or basically go back to school. The NFL in its sort of official formal paperwork process doesn't tell you you're a sixth or seventh round pick. They will tell you to go back to school, and maybe not in so many words, but it's first round, second round, or basically go back to college. Now, there are sort of more informal channels. There are different conversations that coaches can have. They'll get feedback from NFL scouts and use that, which will probably give a little bit more specific. That's where you start hearing, well, this guy had a third to fifth round grade or whatever. That's coming from scouts to the college coaching staffs. And I think Pat Narduzzi has done a good job over the years of providing his players with information and helping them make the most informed decision. Obviously he would like to have everybody back who has an option to come back, but I think he also wants what's best for the players. And he probably sometimes says, look, here's the information from the NFL guys. Kind of looks like it would make sense for you to go, or it kind of looks like it would make sense for you to come back. And they're going to have to decide, and I think even once you get those NFL grades, if you're told that you're a fourth or fifth round pick or a fifth or sixth round pick, some guys are going to say, okay, I'm going to go for that. And some guys might feel like they stand to gain something and improve that standing by playing another year. And so that's a decision all of these guys are going to have to make. And, I don't think it's easy. I mean, to some extent, there's going to be some gambling. I don't think there are any surefire first or second round picks in this group, at least as they look right now. And so there's going to be some gambling there. If you decide to go, you're taking a chance that you might, not get drafted as high as you hope, and you might not get drafted at all. But let's look at these seniors. Let's look at these 27 guys, kind of going position by position. I thought we could sort of revisit their careers a little bit here today on the Morning Pit, just a trip down memory lane. Derek Kyler, the quarterback, we have to put him in the NA category because he hasn't played a single snap. We haven't seen anything out of Derek Kyler, so we don't have a whole lot to reflect on from his career at Pitt. But Nick Patty, we have a good amount. And I'll tell you the things that will stick out to me about Nick Patty. The Central Florida game in 2019, when Kenny Pickett got hurt and he came in and he threw a touchdown, I want to say to, what was his name? Dontavius Butler-Jenkins? I think that was his name, DBJ. He threw a touchdown to Butler-Jenkins, and it was a key play in a game that ends up being, a 1-point win or something. I mean, it was a key play for Pitt for Patty to make that play when he came in place of Kenny Pickett. And then, fast forward a year to 2020, they go down to Florida State coming out of the off week. Kenny Pickett's still a little gimpy from the ankle injury he suffered at Boston College. And so they get down to the 1 yard line and they bring in the touchdown machine, Nick Patty. I think he had 2 rushing touchdowns that day from the 1. So that, those are some of the plays I'm going to remember about Nick Patty. And then, of course, the Peach Bowl. Unfortunate ending for him in a game that he probably would have been a Peach Bowl winning quarterback if only he had, if he had not gotten hurt diving for a touchdown, which is the kind of play that he makes, the kind of play that he likes to make. Keaton Slovis, that book is still being written. That chapter is still being written. I don't know what the standout memory is with Keaton Slovis so far. I think he continues to improve. I talked about a lot about that yesterday. And so I don't need to rehash that conversation fully, but I think these next two games will give him some opportunities, and potentially a bowl game will give him some opportunity to make some plays and maybe make a few memories of his time here at Pitt, and then we'll find out if he decides to come back. Vincent Davis, as a running back, he's a senior. I wouldn't be surprised. I don't know what he's going to do. I wouldn't be surprised if he decides to transfer. I don't think he's ready for the NFL yet, but we'll see what kind of feedback he gets. But he's just been, from all we can see and all we can gather, just a good teammate. A guy who wasn't playing a lot and just kept, or who hasn't always been the featured back. Sometimes he has been, and then he's moved out of that role, and he just keeps working for the team. That game at Georgia Tech last year was probably the pinnacle of his college career, at least at Pitt. And, he seems like a great kid. I think that's probably what I'll remember most. A guy who's a little bit undersized, who runs bigger, stronger than you would expect a guy his size to run, but capable of making plays, and a good blocker and a good teammate. Sibo Flemister is a senior, and Pat Narduzzi said a week or two ago that he hopes Flemister returns as a super senior next season. And I'll tell you, maybe he'll come back next year and make some new memories, but doing a flip into the end zone for that touchdown against Syracuse 2 weeks ago, after he was denied at the one on his first handoff on first down, to get the handoff on second down and run and sort of somersault into the end zone. That's going to stick out to me. Jared Wayne is a senior this year. He's played all 4 years. He never redshirted. And, with Jared Wayne, I go back to Pitt's prospect camp the summer before, when he first earned his scholarship offer from Pitt. There were two guys there that got offers that day, two receivers. It was Jared Wayne and Jaden Payut, who went to Virginia Tech. I don't think he ever really I'm not sure what really became of his career at Virginia Tech, but those were the two guys they really liked, they really wanted. They offered him out of the camp. And, the one guy went to Virginia Tech, but Pitt landed Wayne. And he was a guy who came in, and I was surprised, but he played as a freshman and played quite a bit as a freshman. I did not expect that. I thought he would be a sure redshirt candidate and would maybe come into his own over a couple years. He did come into his own over a couple of years, but he also played as a true freshman. And it's been interesting to watch how Jared Wayne has developed, because he's gone from being really just a possession receiver to a downfield threat and somebody who can really make plays for your offense, a true weapon. And with his size, he can run pretty well. He's got strong hands. I think he's going to be able to play in the NFL, but I wouldn't be surprised if he comes back for a year before he goes. There's 6 senior offensive linemen. 4 of these guys are out of eligibility. 2 of them can still come back. There's Owen Drexel, Gabe Hoy, Marcus Minor, and Carter Warren. They're all super seniors this year. They're done. And then Jake Cradle and Blake Zabovic are redshirt seniors. They'll have the option to come back in 2023. And it's an interesting group. Out of those 6 offensive linemen who are seniors this year, 2 of them are from New Jersey. 3 of them are from the WPIAL. 1 is a transfer. And Drexel, Hoy, Warren, they were part, if you recall, of a 5-man 2017 offensive line recruiting class for Pitt. It was those 3 plus Jerry Drake and Carson Van Lin in that class. And, to some extent, that's sort of a good lesson in why, you have classes every now and then where you just I always use the phrase, you throw numbers at it. And they really did throw numbers at those guys at that position, at the offensive line, in that 2017 class, because they needed to rebuild for the future, and we're in that point now that they were rebuilding for, and not everybody's going to pan out. They obviously got Drexel, Hoy, and Warren, and that worked out great. But you didn't want to just take those 3 guys and hope you go 3 for 3, so they took those 3 plus Jerry Drake, who had some medical problems and ultimately just never really caught on, and then Carson Van Lin, who did play and played a decent amount until he kind of got passed on the depth chart and ended up transferring to Duke. And so, it's sort of a good example of throwing numbers out of position and then hoping you can get a high enough hit rate that it sort of set you up for the future. And it did. It set them up for an ACC championship run with the addition of Marcus Minor as a transfer and Jake Cradle coming in the next year's class, the 2018 recruiting class. Desmond Alexandra, flipping over to the defensive side now, looking at the defensive ends. He was a flip from NC State in his recruitment. Played both defensive end and tackle during his time at Pitt. Just sort of a solid workman-like guy, a good teammate, a good person. You look at some of the stuff he does off the field. I think he's a great representative of the program and the kind of guy you would like to have around. And he certainly, that game against Syracuse 2 weeks ago, probably the best single game of his career, one of the best games of his career. And the kind of game that, I think, you were happy for him because of all he's sort of done for the program over the last few years. Haba Baldonado is an interesting guy. I remember his recruitment kind of blowing up at Clearwater Academy International. I think he was at that school, same school Jared Wayne was at. And all of a sudden in January, all these schools were offering this Italian defensive end from Clearwater Academy International. Everybody's like, what's going on? What's happening here? And I remember Charlie Partridge telling me the story that Carlos Zavko, one of the guys in the recruiting department, Charlie is out on the road one day recruiting in January, and he gets a text from Carlos saying, hey, there's something going on here on the Gulf Coast. You might want to take a look at this. So he pulls up the film on Huddle and says, holy smokes, Rob Harley was the linebackers coach at that point, recruited the Gulf Coast for Pitt, says, Harley, get over there and check this kid out. And Michigan State was hard on him, real heavy for him. And a few other schools were pushing as well. Pitt ended up landing him. And, he had an injury in 2020 that kind of set him back. But he really made up for it last year. 11.5 tackles for loss, 9 sacks. He had 7 tackles in the ACC championship game. He hit a sack in that game as well. I think this year has probably been a bit disappointing in terms of production for Haba Baldonado, but he's had a pretty good career here, and he'll be one I'm interested to see if he decides to come back. I'm guessing he won't come back for a super senior year. He could, but I'm guessing he won't. But we'll see. John Morgan is a guy that I really think of being pretty workmanlike. Him and Desmond Alexandra just go out and just kind of work away every snap. And they haven't put up numbers like Baldonado did or like Rashad Weaver and Patrick Jones did. Morgan has 9.5 sacks over the last 2 seasons, 2020 and 2021. And I think you would probably say those sort of happened kind of quietly. You didn't really notice that John Morgan put up almost 10 sacks over 2 seasons. He just kind of snuck them in here and there. He's blown up here the last couple weeks. This season, all the ends they have 7 sacks in the last, I think, 2 games. Alexandra, Baldonado, and Morgan, that is. But Morgan, for as much as I feel like he's sort of quietly productive, he's very much a team leader and a passionate leader for this team. He gets them fired up. He gets them ready to go and brings a lot of that energy. So even if his production sort of seems to happen quietly, he's not a quiet member of this team. He's an important member of the team. Chris Maloney's a scholarship defensive end. He was a walk-on who earned a scholarship, got a lot of praise from Charlie Partridge. He has played more this year, I think, due to some injuries and, obviously Dayon Hayes' situation. Seems like a real solid team guy, and Charlie Partridge really appreciates his contributions. The defensive tackles who are redshirt seniors, these guys all came in the 2018 class. Tyler Bentley, Devin Danielson, David Green, of course, Danielson from Thomas Jefferson, David Green from Central Catholic. These guys, we've been spoiled watching Pitt and being exposed to, I always go back over this list, Mick Williams, Aaron Donald, Jalen Twyman, Kalijah Cansey. There's all these really productive defensive tackles who just make sort of uncharacteristic plays. They put up uncharacteristic stat lines for a defensive tackle. And so sometimes I fear that we hold like Bentley, Danielson, and Green to that standard and say, well, they're not very good because they haven't put up the numbers that Jalen Twyman did or Kalijah Cansey did or an Aaron Donald or a Mick Williams. But the reality is they've just been really solid defensive tackles. Good against the run, good at helping to eat up space to give the linebackers an opportunity to make plays, trying to create more one-on-ones for the defensive ends. They've just been really solid players, and they'll make a play every now and then in the backfield, but they're really just sort of solid defensive tackles. You'd love to have all the playmakers for sure, but having these guys is pretty good too, particularly if you can pair them with a playmaker like a Kalijah Cansey or Jalen Twyman before that. SirVocea Dennis, you talk about recruits who just came out of nowhere. I mean, this is a guy that Pitt went after because Kadri Jackson decommitted. Remember Kadri Jackson in that recruiting class? I think it was 2019, I think. He took his official visit in June, committed, but then ended up flipping to North Carolina before signing day in December. And so Pitt was like, well, we need another outside linebacker. And they end up finding SirVocea Dennis, a kid out of Syracuse. He was at a prep school in New Jersey. Tim Salem found him. They end up recruiting him, bringing him in, and it was like, who is this guy? This former Army commit, who had no offers. Who is this guy? Isn't going to play? And then he played as a freshman, and I'll never forget. They played Ohio that game, 2019. They played Ohio, and Ohio ran like a wheel route or something, and he was just lost. He had no idea what was going on. He got burned. It might have been Ohio's only touchdown that day, or was certainly their biggest play of the day. He just got completely toasted on the wheel. He had no idea what was going on. Well, he figured it out, and in a big way. Last two seasons, 2020 and 2021, 144 tackles, 24 tackles for loss, 8 sacks. And maybe if there was one play that sums up SirVocea Dennis the most or the best, it was that interception against Clemson last year. Picking off that sort of shovel pass, and it really was. It's a great play of SirVocea Dennis because there's the athleticism. You have to be fast to be able to make that play. You have to be fast to be able to get to the end zone and score on it, 50-yard return, right? But you also have to be smart. And it was a good play call. It was, it was set up exactly right against the play that Clemson wanted to run. And so you give credit to Randy Bates for that. But you give a lot of credit to SirVocea Dennis. He had to identify it. He had to see it. He had to find the gap. He had to get there to make the play and then have the wherewithal to not only pick the pass off, which I think probably is happening so fast that it could be tough to get your head around it, but then realize the opportunity that he had in front of him. That's a signature play for for all of these guys. That's as much a signature play as anything any of the others have done. It really is. Brandon George is a senior this year. He's just a senior, and he's only played in a handful of games this season. He's been out with injury. I suspect he'll take a redshirt this year and come back next year as a redshirt senior, and then actually have the opportunity to come back in 2024 as a super senior. This is only his 4th year of college. And so, I don't say only. Obviously that's pretty well into your college career, but in terms of eligibility with the COVID year, he's going to have the opportunity to come back for 2 more seasons. And I think he will. I think he'll come back at least for 2023 and then potentially for 2024 as well. And I think he's a good player. He's just been a backup. He's been behind other guys. And so that is just kind of, it's put him in a certain position, but I think when he gets his opportunity, he's going to shine. Shane Simon and Tyler Wiltz, these guys both came in as transfers this year. Simon has another year. He could potentially come back to Pitt. Wiltz is done. He's out of eligibility. But they've both been really solid. They filled in what Pitt needed, which is veteran linebackers. And just like the whole linebacker group, I think those guys have gotten better as the year went on. And I think we'll look back and say those were pretty good transfers to add. Marquez Williams, he started 22 games the last 2 seasons, plus I think 9 this year. So he's a 30-start cornerback. He's got 5 interceptions so far, just all over the last 3 seasons. He's got 2 this year, 3 in the previous 2. He really doesn't get targeted a lot. You look back over the games and think about how often you've seen Marquez Williams be involved in things. It's not very often because he doesn't really, certainly this season, he hasn't gotten targeted all that much. And I think that's a show of respect for Marquez Williams. For a guy who I think a lot of us wrote off as being too small or not fast enough for this or that, he's actually been pretty good as a corner at Pitt. AJ Woods is a guy who came in with a lot of speed. Speed was sort of his calling card. He made a huge interception in the ACC championship game. Arguably, I think almost bigger than the interceptions that Eric Hallett made. And Hallett's another senior. He's going to, like Woods, they'll both have the opportunity to come back. I'd kind of be surprised, really, if either one of them comes back for another season, but we'll see what they end up deciding. But Hallett, of course, had I mean, signature plays, plural, with 2 interceptions in that ACC title game in Charlotte. And then Judson Tallender. He's been a reserve, but he's played 39 games over the course of his career so far, all in the last 4 seasons or so. He had his first career sack at Virginia, so good on him. But he's been a good, solid backup safety. And here's the thing I would say. So that's all the seniors. We just went through all 27 guys. And here's the last thing I would say about this group. Okay. We try and reflect on what they accomplished. We try and reflect on what they've done at Pitt and what they've contributed to this football program. Let me give you their stats from that group and what they produced in the ACC championship game last year. Servassier Dennis, 12 tackles, 2 tackles for loss, 2 sacks. Habo Baldonado, 7 tackles, 1 tackle for loss, 1 sack. Desmond Alexandra, 6 tackles, half a tackle for loss. Marquez Williams, 5 tackles and a pick. Brandon George, 3 tackles. Eric Hallett, 2 tackles and 2 interceptions. David Green, 2 tackles and 1 tackle for loss. John Morgan, Tyler Bentley, Devin Danielson, 2 tackles each. AJ Woods, an interception. All those offensive linemen, all those guys lined up across the front. 11 of the starters. Half the team, half of your starters are in the group that are seniors right now. Obviously there's some key guys like, Kenny Pickett, Jordan Addison, who were big contributors to that team. There were some seniors who left last year who were big contributors to that team. But you're talking about half the starters in that game are from this current senior class. And if you want to talk about legacy, you want to talk about what they accomplished in their careers, you want to talk about what they've done and what they'll leave behind and the mark they made on the impact they made on this program, that's it right there. It's Charlotte. Because those guys, obviously led by Kenny Pickett, went down to Charlotte and won, the most tangible accomplishment that this football program has experienced in 40 years. So that's what they're going to carry out at Pitt. They're going to have those rings, and that'll be the legacy for this class is what they did on that December Saturday night in Charlotte, North Carolina. All right, when we come back to the Morning Pitt tomorrow, we're going to have our preview of the weekend. We'll preview Pitt Duke, the home finale, talk about what to look for in that game. We'll also look around the Coastal, and we'll recap all the basketball action as well from this week, and we see what happens with Jeff Capel's group at the Barclays Center in the Legends Classic. So be sure to tune in for that. Thanks for watching this episode. We appreciate it. As always, make sure you subscribe and like the video. And then, hope you've had a great week so far. We're almost to the end of it. It's Thursday. This is basically like a Friday is how I look at it. So TGIT, right? All right. Have a good, hope you have a good Thursday. And we will talk to you tomorrow morning on the Morning Pit right here on youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com.